All righty. Just going to wait until I'm clear that we have liftoff here. So if somebody can say something in the comment section, if they can hear us, then that would be great. One person is watching now. It started less than 1 minute ago. So let's give everybody a chance to get in. It says there's 3 watching. So if somebody can please type something into, yes. All right. Perfect. Okay, there we go. You guys can hear us? Yes. We don't want to start the show until we're sure everyone can hear us. So somebody say, we hear you. All right. Yay. Perfect. Here we go. 3. All right. Now we can show our faces.
Unravel.
All righty. We have liftoff. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to, this is the 3rd edition of the Word Salad Live podcast. And we have lots of word salad to toss.
Oy vey.
Oy vey. And it wouldn't be, first of all, good afternoon. It's Wednesday afternoon. How are you?
I am coming out of some insane big tech targeting fuckery, which has been going on for the past week, ever since you and I did our last show, and ever since I recorded a podcast with Miriam. What is epically scary about when I record shows with Miriam, which, no offense to Miriam whatsoever, but it reminded me why I don't do shows with her, is that we get targeted the day we both record, not when it airs, which is extra creepy because it's like, who's watching us and where and when? No me gusta.
Interesting. I sometimes wonder, like, what systems, like, you know, I've had more technical complications at certain places I've lived, or locations that I've recorded at, and been on like different kinds of internet, right? Whether it be through AT&T or Google or Spectrum or right? And like what speed of internet, whether it's high wired or Wi-Fi, hardwired or Wi-Fi. I wonder what all the elements of that scenario are, right?
It reminds me of, I remember on an early words that you and I did, we honed in on like whatever the big tech company is that owns Ask Jeeves and dictionary.com and thesaurus.com. It's like this giant mega oligarchy. And when I'm fucked with like this, it shows me the weave of everything, because they went after me on MailChimp. So the way it wound down this time was the day that we recorded, as I spent 2.5 hours doing a MailChimp, and the second I went to press save and close, the whole system crashed and bounced me to a like 404 page not found. But I wasn't stressed because MailChimp auto saves every 5 minutes. I went back, 3/4 of it was totally gone. Like, how does that even happen? And then all my Gmail boxes suddenly ran out of storage on the same day. And then, of course, I got a strike on YouTube.
So everything's owned by the same company. It's just, yeah, like the plantation store is closed. Sorry, Dani. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But you know, we get to do what we do here today. And so that should just delight you to no end.
Right. But I think it leads into us giving a heads up that like, we're saving what we were going to talk about today for afterwards.
Some of it, at least, anyway. Yeah. So this is a live stream. Post this live stream. We will record the afterwards, and that will be available later. So don't go there right after the live stream. Go there in a couple of hours, and then it will be there, because we've just decided that like the consequences for certain things sometimes are very strange, but you know, we just decided if we're gonna have to suffer them, then you're gonna have to pay for ours. Right? Anywho,
we're cheap content.
I have to like it's like, you know, I don't know. There was a time when stuff like this bothered me more, or would have bothered me more. And I don't know. I'm not that bothered by it anymore.
I mean, I give myself props. I made a ragey video yesterday. I was also locked out of Facebook for a day, but I'm just like, okay, whatever. It is what it is. I don't really care that much anymore. How are you?
I'm good. It's like hot. It's really hot in this office, and I don't know. It's been like significantly warmer the last couple of days than it has been, and there's not like individual air conditioning for your office. It's for the whole building, and like 90% of the time it's fine, but today it feels a little warm. So Just saying.
If you need a trip, we're happy to hold space for you.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Just busy and yeah, I'm good. But I do have one thing to surprise you with, and I didn't intentionally not tell you this before. I just totally forgot. But somebody when we were doing, I think it was in Conspiracy Cocktail, or yeah, I think it was Conspiracy Cocktail on Friday. Like, oh, can you talk about this with Dani? So it's a short item, and I think you'll be amused by this. Maybe were you aware that we had a problem with caste systems and discrimination based on them in the United States?
With task systems?
Caste systems, CASTE. Have you heard of caste discrimination in the United States?
I mean, isn't that what woke culture is attempting to create a caste system based on skin tone, genitalia, pronoun preferences?
Well, right. Like, yes, that like on some level, but this is the other kind. This is like, apparently we literally have in existence that needs to be dismantled, like an Indian caste system in operation in the United States. Are you aware of this?
No, but I've traveled to India extensively, so I'm very excited to hear how we're mimicking their system.
Yeah. So I noticed this on, so like one of the guilty pleasures on some level, it's also informative, but I appreciate it more for the guilty pleasure aspect of it. Of my life is looking at Revolver's newsfeed, right? Okay. And I found out about this from the Revolver's newsfeed, and whenever they post something like this in their feed, there's like like they kind of memify it in the way that they link to it. Yep. So there was this article a few days ago, I think it was this one, right? Seattle, why U.S. cities ban on caste discrimination is historic. And so, or maybe it was this one. I can't remember which one it was, but it was like a few days ago. It was on Friday or Thursday night going into Friday morning when I read it, right? And it was like, what the fuck? And I was like, okay. So like, I was like, well, maybe caste discrimination is different than the caste system, because we all, like in world history or something like that, or studying different cultures at some point in high school or junior high, learned about the caste system in India, right? Most of us learned that, right? So I was like, okay, well, maybe caste discrimination is something different. So I went and looked it up.
I just want to give a real life example of how the caste system in India works. Okay. Because I did a 10-day Vipassana in Bodh Gaya, which is in northern India. I did it I think it was right at the beginning of 2000, or even 99 went into 2000. But so the retreat was being held at a Thai monastery in this like really poor, teeny tiny kind of mountain town. And we came out of meditation one day to like the most hideous smell. And this woman who's of the untouchable class is on her knees. She has the grating for the sewer up, and she's literally digging the shit out of these like narrow grooves in the grating with her hands, no gloves, and dumping it into a bucket. So I'm interested to see what is going to be the equivalent here in first world United States.
Okay. Awesome. So before, like when I first heard this, before I read the article and whatever, I went to make sure that caste discrimination wasn't something entirely different than the caste system, right? Because they changed the definitions of things. So this, just Wikipedia, like the best book in the world. Caste discrimination in the United States is a form of discrimination based on the social hierarchy, which is determined by a person's birth.
Oh, right? So caste discrimination is an America specific.
Well, I think there's a new condition called caste discrimination in the United States, right? Which is apparently, yeah, right. Okay.
Well, but look at it. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, got it.
Right. That's what it's literally called, caste discrimination. I just looked at, looked up caste discrimination meaning, and the first return is caste discrimination in the United States. Okay. So then you can go to 2015. What is caste discrimination? Involves massive violations of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, right? There's like some
apartheid caste discrimination.
I mean, I think people think of so the only thing that I would think of, because I come from a family where apartheid is discussed a lot, but the caste system is not. right? I think they would say apartheid in their definition of it is strictly along racial lines. Because remember, they didn't have any respect for my idea of medical apartheid a couple of years ago.
Correct.
But so apartheid.
I'm sorry that they're short-sighted that they couldn't see that you were right.
I think they've come around, but yeah, I think they've come around, or at least they don't care anymore. So it would be simple, like black, white, separate in their eyes, right? Like, sort of like the triangles on your background, right? There's no gray ones. They're all black or white and they're separate, but except for they're next to each other. So I don't know if that's a bus or what that is, but anywho, okay. So I think they would say that the caste system, and I think my father and my sister my dad would probably agree with me that the caste system is an Indian thing. My sister might say, because she's more modernly academically woke, that, oh, no, it's taken root here and blah, 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 right? She might say that. But I think they would see that as having some level of class by like financial wealth, or like maybe positions your parents held in the society or whatever, as opposed to just strictly on immutable characteristics.
Okay.
Right. I don't know that for sure, so I'm not trying to speak for them. Okay. So then so we see this building, 2015, 2021, Title VII and caste discrimination at Harvard Law, right? And so we have this building here in the academia. Human Rights Watch does something on it. And then all of a sudden, 4 days ago, it's a news story. Right. And then here, there's an article in 2017 describing the difference between that and racism. Right. So this is talking about India's caste system. And then they're starting to ask if this is like an issue in the United States. And then there's all of these articles here.
What does this have to do with South Asian Americans?
Well, let's click on it and find out. Right. So this person is the socialist city council person from Seattle. I've seen her on like a lot of like progressive, like left-wing alternative podcasts and stuff like that, railing for socialism. Right. But
they banned caste-based discrimination. When was caste-based discrimination legal and how did it look?
Right. So this is basically saying, on Tuesday, Seattle became the first U.S. city to ban caste-based discrimination after a vote by the local council. Ahead of the vote, several South Asians, is India considered part of South Asia?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Several South Asians stood in line for hours to share their stories with council members, right? So academic Prem Prayar was one of them. He said he fled to the U.S. from Nepal in 2015 after his family was brutally attacked by a group of upper caste people for speaking up against atrocities. But that didn't stop the discrimination he faced because of his caste. I have
to take issue with this reporting from the get-go. I'm sorry, I just got to slow it down. His family was brutally attacked by a group of upper caste people. Mm-hmm. So he fled from Nepal because random people had an issue with them and speaking up against atrocities. What atrocities? Like, this is terrible reporting.
Terrible reporting. Yeah. I agree.
A shit show. Okay.
So once he says he was invited to lunch at a friend's house in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. I was hesitant to go as caste dictates where you sit and eat, but I thought it will be different here as people are educated in a country where human rights are valued.
I don't even understand where that goes. You weren't going to go because you were afraid of where you were going to be seated? Right.
But
none of this happened. Okay.
But just as he was about to serve food for himself, he was asked not to touch anything. Instead, someone else handed him a plate of food.
Okay, did everyone else?
Right.
Everyone else also handed their own plates of food?
Right. The caste system is one of the oldest forms of surviving social discrimination in South Asian countries, including.
I'm sorry. But once again, for an article on caste discrimination, this was the most hard-hitting example they could find, that someone was invited to a meal at someone's house and was handed a plate of food.
Well, like the thing that I don't understand here is like people, there's assholes everywhere, right? But there's no law that, right? So I don't understand what they're fighting against, right? Like it doesn't, like I
don't understand what was actually banned in Seattle.
Right, and why the supporting evidence was from San Francisco, right?
Right.
So the whole thing, like, what is this? Like, what is this really about? This is about something else, right? This has to be about something other than what it is, because it makes less than no sense, right? Like, I don't think like either you or I would be in support of a caste system, but this was like the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And so somebody had just said, will you talk about this with Dani? So every once in a while I can do what someone asked me to do. And so I'm talking about it with Dani. So
here's what it reminds me of. So you've heard me talk a million times about how crazy the ecstatic dance community here has gotten. And so I ran into one of the DJs and we were talking about dance, and she said, you know, I had to fight to get, she's like, it's Black History Month, and I had to fight tooth and nail to get my other Black friends to get into dance for free. And I just kept my mouth shut, because I'm like, why do we assume that everyone's poor? But here's what happened was that night at dance, it was either 3 or 4 people who had never been there. And if you haven't been to ecstatic dance, it's fucking freaky deaky, and you're probably going to feel really out of place, because it's a bunch of people expressing really wildly and unabashedly in a way that's not really usually acceptable. So these 3 or 4 people, I'm not remembering, came in street clothes. You know, the rest of us were in sweats. They looked around and they just sat in the middle of the floor watching everyone. And then the DJ said, and then they felt really uncomfortable and really unsafe. And I was talking about it with a girlfriend afterwards, and it's like, yeah, that's called social awkwardness. And social awkwardness, like this Nepalese person is experiencing at the San Francisco lunch party, is now being rebranded with these like discriminatory narratives because people don't want to take responsibility for just random social awkwardness.
Right. So when somebody says they like, I would feel uncomfortable at ecstatic dance. Like, that's just not my type of party or thing. But that's why I don't go to ecstatic dance. I'm glad that it exists so the people can go there and do that. And so they're not doing that at my techno party. Right. And even if they came and did do that, like, I'd get over it. Right. It's like not my, sometimes, I mean, some of the people, I'm sure it's fine. Some of the stuff I see when I see people doing this like super emotive dance, I'm just like, I struggle to understand how the sounds coming out of those speakers that are making me do this make you do that. But I respect your sovereignty as an individual and have at it. Right. And sometimes I'm able to move myself into the place of being humored by it. So then you also made me laugh. So awesome. Right.
Right. But it's like
this equation, this conflation of discomfort with unsafe, right? Like, every time I'm uncomfortable, like I can't think of the number of times, like very rarely when I feel uncomfortable, do I also feel unsafe? Sure, there is some crossover sometimes, but I would say it's less than 1 time out of 10, maybe even like less than 5 times out of 100, where uncomfortable also equates to unsafe. And so this conflation, this is the product completely of the social justice nonsense, all that kind of stuff movement, that anytime we don't like how we feel, it's not okay and it has to change, but we don't have to change. The whole world around us needs to alter to our comfort level.
Exactly, which ultimately renders us less safe because we don't have tools or self-esteem to handle ourselves. It would be like, and I get it, ecstatic dance made me
not you less safe, but the people who are complaining about being unsafe, that actually makes them unsafe what they're doing.
Well, here, I'll roll it back.
Okay.
But it would be like, so you go to ecstatic dance and you own, this makes me feel uncomfortable. But if you went to ecstatic dance and instead you rebranded your discomfort as I feel safe because I'm a Jew, or I feel unsafe because I'm a woman, that's what is going on right now.
Yes, I got you.
If I say I'm uncomfortable, I'm taking responsibility for my own internal state. If I say I went into this space and I feel unsafe, now I'm projecting that discomfort outwards and I'm saying, oh, it's because of the space or the people in the space that I'm feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, I get that. But what the thing, I think what you're saying, well, okay, maybe this is, I get what the things you just said, but when you say that them doing that is the thing that's actually making us unsafe, you don't mean unsafe at ecstatic dance. You mean making the world more unsafe than it are. Okay, I think I'm not getting it.
I mean, it's making the people who are claiming they feel unsafe less safe because they're
okay.
to dodge opportunities to build the psycho-emotional tools that would allow them to feel safe no matter how freaky ecstatic dance is.
I think we call this tolerance or thick skin or immunity or whatever.
All of those things that we do because it's an unsafe world.
Laner asked if they made them wear a mask at the caste discrimination dinner or whatever, like the people who are.
Well, is that caste discrimination if we're being told to wear masks? Caste discrimination, they just made that illegal in Seattle.
It's very interesting, right? So
I mean, it's not interesting at all, which is the whole problem.
It's not interesting.
No,
it's so boring. I do have to tell you, this was one of those things that, like, when you're reading this at like 11:34, right before you go to bed, like, what? Right? Like, it was like, it's not that easy to shock me anymore, but I wasn't seeing this one coming. And so I was a little taken aback. It took me a few minutes to get my head around that one, but yeah. So
yeah, I don't know what to say on it. If there's any, I mean, if anyone listening has any real deal examples, not this like Nepalese guy who felt uncomfortable at a lunch party, I don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, just looking to see if there's anything else. It's hard. Guys, we'll definitely take a look at the do some things with some comments at the end, but I struggle to track comments while also staying focused on the show, and Laura's not with me today to point things out. So we'll do questions and answers and comments at the end. If that's all I got on that, but I just thought there had been a request for you to input on that, and now we have it. So there we go.
Robert in the house. Hey, Robert.
Robert Forte or Robert Phoenix?
Robert Phoenix.
Hi, Robert Phoenix. Love to you and your mother, Robert. Anywho, okay. Would you like to talk unity and movements, or the genius beyond belief with the Jufro and I'm not going to say the other part.
I know. Let's talk unity. I just feel like there's more juice there. There's going to be a lot of code, I'm guessing, in this conversation.
All right. So I'm hearing a lot from all sorts of angles about the importance of unity in the movement, right? And I have a lot of issues with both unity and with movements. And I'm going to give a metaphor or an analogy, let you guys suss out what else I'm talking about. But unity and movement are two elements that characterize aspects of the electronic dance music community, as well as the alternative information community here, right? I don't know.
Bodily functions.
Huh? Yes, that very important ones, right? Okay, so I don't know. Are you familiar with the term plur?
No.
Okay, so plur, I believe the term was either coined by or popularized by Frankie Bones, who was one of the original American rave DJs from New York. If I have that wrong, my bad. But I believe that is kind of the lore of rave history in the United States, that he either coined it or popularized it. And it stood for peace, love, unity, and respect. And that these were sort of the organizing principles of the rave scene, right? Now, I'm assuming you've been to a rave?
No.
You've never been to a rave? You didn't go to any in the 90s?
No.
Okay. I'm assuming you've done ecstasy.
Yes, I've done ecstasy.
Okay. So you're familiar with, like, certainly for some people always, but in your early experimentation with ecstasy, like, sometimes it makes you feel while you're on it a way that you don't really actually feel about someone, something, some experience in real life, right?
Yes.
So
and I've got myself in trouble.
Okay. So this is one of these things that, like, as like in the early days and in the height of American rave, like, maybe there was some momentary validity to this idea, right? In some ways, like when you look back at like Summer of Love or Woodstock or whatever, like for 1 second, that idea of free love or whatever, it had some like some genuine like real grain of truth to it. And then like after that, things morph and change as they do. You cannot extend a moment forever, right? Like it exists, you feel it, you enjoy it, you have it, you remember it, you reflect on it, but you cannot extend it past its life. It becomes distorted, right? And so, you know, at a certain point, I don't know exactly what point, because I didn't start going to raves until later in the 90s. They kind of started in the early 90s. So, but by the time that I was going, right, that was not a way that I felt the right way to characterize what was going on. Even though while in the height of like the ecstasy, when you're peaking on ecstasy, you could still have that moment of feeling that way. But I wouldn't have used that to characterize the entire experience, because there was people there selling bunk shit. There was people there ripping people off. There was people there taking, you know, advantage of people inappropriately when they're screwed up. There's all kinds of stuff going on. There's rave promoters promising certain DJs, certain sound systems, certain locations, all of that kind of stuff, not delivering. There was not enough like integrity or adherence to even an expanded idea of those terms to say that that's what that was, right? And over time, and I still, like, I think that, you know, in my opinion, there's only really two words in that string, and it's the first and the last, that really matter and that are important to sort of strive for and embody. And that is peace, in terms of the way you behave when you are in these scenarios, and respect. And by respect, I don't mean you have to respect everybody, everything they say, do, da, 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 da. But while you're here, you treat people with respect. You respect the sovereignty of the other human being in front of you, right? And love and unity is, you know, open for like a really wide, different kinds of interpretations, and is not something that you can get a large group of people in modern society to adhere to in any way that represents what the words mean, right? But, you know, if the people who were in powerful positions within the scene, right? Like if you accused, like if they did something shady and you called it out, then you were, you know, causing division in the scene. But, you know, if somebody little did something that was not necessarily anti that, but just another interpretation of what someone thinks is that, then you're blackballed or whatever it is from the scenario. So it became, in a lot of ways, like these became very like political charged words to a certain extent within the scene. Right. And, you know, I don't need to love or be in unity with everybody that is in the room when I'm listening to music go, but I expect everyone to behave peacefully and to respect the space and individuality of each other person there while they're in the space. Whatever's happening before or after that is like irrelevant. Right. And so I think that the same applies in this. There's a lot of similarities between the party scene and the alternative information scene, right? Even within the party scene, some people like big events, some like little events, some like underground, some like more commercial, some like the club, some like house, some like techno, some like, right? It's divided into, so it's very, very similar as the alternative information community. And I think this idea that if you are not engaging in unity, right, then you are causing division, or that you are a problem that needs to be removed, is not a good situation to get into, because you see people agreeing to or overlooking or making excuses for, you know, unacceptable behavior because somebody with power is doing it. Whereas if they were the one doing it with no power, they'd easily be excluded from the group. You know what I mean? And maybe that's right. I don't know. Like, it depends on the situation. But I don't think we all have to be in unity. I think a healthy community allows for, you know, very wide range of thoughts and ideas, right, to be talked about and to coexist, so long as people are behaving peacefully and treating one another with, you know, basic respect, which doesn't mean agreeing with them or overlooking or just, you know, going along with something that doesn't make sense to you or isn't true, right? And, you know, the rave scene as it once did does not anywhere near exist anymore. It is a scandalous cartel run, you know, the shady operation. Mostly every once in a while you can still find a good party or a good crew that does events with integrity and that, you know, really cares for the people who are their longtime supporters and all of that kind of stuff. But it has all the same issues that the alternative information community has, right? And so, you know, and love, like for the, I haven't too much heard anybody proposing that all of us in the alternative information community must love each other. So I'm not gonna focus on that too much right now. I mean, I think there's a general love that one has for the other human beings, even when they're very angry at them, just because we recognize that we're sort of somehow of the same thing and in the same type of situation. But again, there's like a wide way, a lot of ways that can be perceived. But peace and respect is something that, you know, is different. Unity doesn't, those things don't require unity. In fact, actual peace and actual respect it acknowledges differences and separations and all of that kind of stuff, right? So before I move on to movements, I'm going to hush myself up a second and hear what you have to say about what I just said.
Well, I feel like the word's been weaponized, and I was just looking up the etymology because I feel like what is really like homogenization and a sort of like more communist loyalty is now being rebranded as unity, which doesn't make any sense. So, like, if you think about it, you really can't spell.
What do you think is being rebranded?
The word unity.
No, you said something else is being rebranded as unity.
It's being rebranded as communism and as homogenization.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
That everyone be the same. So look at it. You can't spell community without unity, right? So there is some sort of common unity. So taking, you know, the rave scene or my ecstatic dance community, it used to be there was a unity around our devotion to a space in which we could dance, right? Where that started to go to shit is when the woke shit started to come in. And then all of a sudden, you know, certain groups aren't supposed to pay and certain groups are supposed to be given a leg up. And it's like, well, this doesn't have anything to do with the original community, which is we dance. And who cares what you think about XYZ or how you vote or XYZ. So if you look at the health freedom community, which as I understood it, and, you know, we'll get to movements in a second, but I thought that it was just devoted around a kind of my body, my choice, medical freedom, I can do whatever I want. But now it's demanding that everyone has this one homogenized way of thinking and all agrees in lockstep to not talk about certain things, to double down on the validity of other things that haven't been proven, right? So there's this attempt to micromanage and control everyone. Like, I don't mind unity if it's around one common theme, if it's around, you know, taking ecstasy and dancing to music that goes, if you can make the noise that you do really well. Right. Then that's fine. Then there's a unity there around the common things, but they're trying to take it into these ridiculous realms. And where I'm seeing it in this community is when a journalist who I was talking to, this was an off the record conversation, was first taking issue with another person who I just interviewed that got me a strike on YouTube, so I'm not going to say that person's name, but was starting to express interest into some more fringy ideas. Mm-hmm. And then the journalist I was talking to said, well, this is a direct attack on our movement, and he's trying to ruin our movement. So I think the other piece that can't be overlooked is the narcissism of the people who are demanding this unity of thought,
right?
Wherein everything revolves around them. And it's like the idea that someone's interest is directly related or directly meant to sabotage your thing puts you in the center of the multiverse and everything revolves around you. So I think that narcissism is probably one of the indications that someone has lost the plot and isn't able to really have tolerance for differences of opinion. But I feel like where you're taking issue with unity, my sense is that that word and that concept is being weaponized and used to drive us deeper into a more communist paradigm, but under the guise of some like new age stuff.
Yeah. No, I like that explanation. I think I could also change my sort of perspective on it if the idea was like, we're all here unified around, right? But I'm not like, there's plenty of people that I see at parties that like, I'm not united with them in anything other than, you know what I mean? Right. So yes, but similar to what's happened in alternative information stuff, at a certain point, the dance music community became a monoculture. Like it became, you know, very, you know, one-sided politically, very out of control in the same way that your ecstatic dance kind of thing, so to even some more absurd levels that I'm not going to get into right here, right? And so, but even before that happened, like when I like at the time that I already saw that like maybe unity around anything other than the sound or whatever, right? Was not really achievable, was long before we had any of this SJW stuff. It was, you know, around a lot of behaviors and things that went on at parties, right? And so like, you know, it's very easy to be like, I want nothing to do with this other person that's here. I'm going to behave peacefully towards them and I'm going to respect their sovereignty as an individual to come and enjoy the party and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I like the way that you sort of took that apart and put it back together. The other thing is not just around one homogenized thought, but also the idea that a community has to have a movement that has to have leaders, right? And that, you see what I'm saying? Like, that's the other thing, is that we're being instructed that there are certain people that are very important to the movements, i.e. the leaders, right? Who we must overlook any concerns or shortcomings or anything like that, because this is the person that is going to lead us to the promised land, right? And I've even heard people say, like, we're very close to winning this one, and if you ruin it now, and as I've seen so many other movements be ruined or whatever it is, right? Then, you know, it's happened over and over and over again. Like, this is not a win-lose kind of thing, right? That is the problem with all of this, right? Is that when there becomes a war that you're trying to win, then certain kinds of behaviors that wouldn't otherwise be accepted suddenly become acceptable, even though they go against the entire thing that you're supposedly fighting against. It doesn't, right? It becomes this strange scenario where in order to overcome the thing you don't like, you have to become the thing you say you don't like.
Yeah, it's completely ass backwards, which I think, you know, ultimately ties us into the fact that movements are bullshit, quite literally. Movements are shit and movements are shit. But when we look at, I mean, I think it's a straight up case of doublespeak, of unity no longer means what it used to mean. Remember, during the last presidential election, I'm pretty sure that they were calling the Dems the Unity Party. And I'm continually shocked by the dehumanizing, hateful rhetoric coming out of all parties, but also that party itself. And then as we've seen these cries for unity escalate, I would say over the past maybe 3 to 4 weeks, I'm also seeing like blatant downriver selling coming from the same people who are talking about unity. So I feel like it's being used as armor. That's like, I'm about to be really divisive and treat people in my community like shit. So I'm going to double down on this need for unity to create a smoke screen around how shitty I'm behaving to people who I don't understand or I may not agree with, which shouldn't be a problem.
So it's like unity around what I think is important, but division is fine for everything else.
Well, and it also goes back to this like ideological control that people feel the need to exert on one another. Like I used to live in and I keep tying it to community, right? Because in my mind, those are bound. But I used to live in a community at the bottom of Topanga Canyon. And, you know, we were certainly a wild artist community and we were so fucking different. There were anarchists, there were like people who worked for the UN, there were vegans, there were people who like hunted and ate off the land. Like there were, you know, hardcore druggies, there were sober people, there was everything. We were always unified in protecting our land, in helping everyone who lived on the land. That was never in question. And all the other stuff was just none of our business. And why all of a sudden it's become everyone's business to judge what people think, believe, the choices they make for their bodies or their voting is where we've gone off the rails. And I think that's where we could tie it back to is like, why do you care if someone in your so-called community has an idea that you don't agree with? And why should that endanger your bowel movement? I don't get it.
Right. Yes. So movements are, I'm going to get into my movement analogy and metaphor in just a minute, but to the extent that we are in a community, right, the only it should be a single unifying idea if there's going to be any kind of unity, i.e. your land, or i.e. like bodily autonomy. That's it. Right? Like if the health freedom movement was strictly about bodily autonomy, period, end of story, whatever each person thinks that is for themselves, that's what it is, then, and there's no other stuff around that, right? And within that, there can be people with differing opinions, and you can go see that leader that is in agreement with you if you like, and so can decide they don't need any leader and they'll take care of it themselves, right? So yeah, I mean, you know, that's, yeah, I agree. I think there was like one other thing I was going to say. But also like if something is if a movement is about to win, right? Nobody who's about to win can't withstand like a little controversy right before the finish line, right? Like I'll take it to tennis like I always do. Like a lot of people, like when they're serving for the match, right, when they have match point, they may not win on the first match point, and then they will on the next one. Sometimes it takes them 3 or 4 match points or whatever. But if they get to match point and they can't cross the finish line, they weren't going to win. The person who put them in that position of not being able to overcome that challenging moment. Like, so to me, if you really want like a hardened, when I say hardened, I don't mean in the negative sense of the word, but like someone who can deal with all kinds of shit community, right? You better be prepared to withstand both good faith arguments against some of the things you're saying and even some of the bad faith ones, because that's always going to be an issue.
Well, and it's just I don't understand where this came in, like where this infection inserted itself into our relating and our discourse, where we all have to believe the exact same things, unless it's that people are pushing lies and nefarious things, and their lies and nefarious things can't stand up to alternative perspectives. So I feel like at this point, we're honing in on another signifier of people who are full of shit or attempting to do the populace harm.
Or even more, you know, sinister on some level. Like if someone is telling a lie right now, that at least that's out there and that can be discovered. But if someone is systematically avoiding a certain issue, or like understands that they're walking people in a direction where later something will come that they're not going to like, but it hasn't yet, so you don't necessarily have to talk about it, right? Then, you know, that's like that. Yes, then that's that nefarious thing. And that's the big thing that I see, because I don't see any of the sort of unofficially nominated or maybe officially nominated leaders of said movements ever coming out and making statements about their firm commitment to bodily autonomy, regardless of what their opinion is versus someone else's, or absolute free speech, at least up to the level that we already have laws against, right? Like they already have laws against screaming fire in the crowded theater or certain kinds of libel or whatever. So you don't hear those statements being made. And there's a reason why those statements are not being made. And it's because, you know, they don't believe in bodily autonomy in the same way that a lot of people who've entrusted them do, right? The other thing that, like, there's one question, and I was thinking about this because I know bodily autonomy is like, just like certain terms around the ideas of sovereignty or whatnot, are language that you don't hear people use until they've come to a certain level of like understanding of information or sophistication or whatever. Right. But a really simple thing that gets tossed around all the time that I don't understand. Well, I do understand, but if I were just pretending like I didn't know what was going on here, I wouldn't understand, is in the same sentence that they're talking about how not giving informed consent is a violation of the Nuremberg Code, they're not addressing how that also includes mandates. You cannot possibly give informed consent, you know, and say also this is mandated type of thing, right? So that conversation is, huh?
And we know why they're not talking.
Right. And so this is right. So these are the telltale signs. And let's give some grace here. If we are wrong about this, then I would love to hear from the people. Oh God, you know what? I overlooked saying that. I believe in absolute bodily autonomy, and informed consent and mandates cannot exist in the same situation, right? And maybe we're wrong, but I somehow think we're not going to hear that.
I mean, there's so many other markers that go along with the people who aren't saying that, you know, and I know we're going to get into it in afterwards, but it's just like, it's fucking obvious. It's fucking frustrating. I think at this point we know we should add unity to the word salad logo. Okay. Along with emergence and sense making and fucking
it's going to get to the point where there's so much stuff in this salad that it's just like a fart waiting to happen, right? There's so many cruciferous vegetables. Correct. Right. It's the circle jerk of self-contained flatulence that is, yeah. Okay, so now on to the second rave analogy, okay? So in the year 2000, the Detroit Electronic Music Festival emerged, okay? And so Detroit is considered the birthplace, at least, of American techno, right? Like there's, some might say that it's all techno, others would say, well, you know, Berlin or London or some other places had an emerging techno scene at the same time of a slightly different style. Right. So in the year 2000, the Detroit Electronic Music Festival emerged, and it was a free event in Hart Plaza in downtown Detroit. And all of the, like, well, not all, but many of the main characters in the development of Detroit style techno were part of it. It was a free event, and it ended up being bigger, like millions of people came. It ended up being bigger than anyone imagined. It created a much needed economic boom for the city during that weekend. And it was clear from that experience that this idea was something, they were onto something, and that this should go on. But there were certain issues. And so the next year they became they became Focus Detroit Electronic Music Festival, because Ford sponsored them by giving them $500,000, which allowed them to keep the festival free, right? And so you have the entrance of sponsors, and on the one hand, it's great that it could remain free, but nothing is really free, right? So you begin to have some changes. And then in 2003, Derek May who is one of the founders of Detroit techno, right? Strings of Life. People can go listen if they want. He became involved. He became kind of in charge. And since then, Derek May has been the focus of a lot of not good attention. And I don't know what the truth about all those stories are, but if they are true, then that's not good. And if they're not true, it sucks that someone is making, I haven't done enough research to have an opinion. But he
Hold up. I just want everyone to take in that statement. I haven't done enough research to have an opinion. What would our world be like if everyone could acknowledge that when we don't have enough information, we don't have to have an opinion? Sorry, just wanted
the only opinion I have about Derek May is I've highly enjoyed some sets I've had the pleasure of being there for over the course of my existence. He plays a style of techno that even people who say they don't like techno seem to like, right? So, it's very danceable. It's a good time at a party, all that kind of stuff, right? So he took over, I think, in like 2002, 2003. The first time I went to Detroit Music Festival, it was still called Demph. I think it was the Focus Demph. And it was free. Like there, but you could, I had a press pass. So like I could go into VIP areas and like eat and drink for free and stuff. They were making money from charging to get into VIP areas or food and drink or different things like that. So I can't remember if it was if I went in 2002 or 2003. Sometime around 2003, they changed the name to Movement, right? And then a year or two later, someone else took over and they changed it to Fuse in Detroit for 2 years. And then a club and certain promoters took it over and it became Movement again. And since it became Fuse in and then Movement again, it was always with a ticket price. Like in the first couple of years, it was kind of low, but now it's just like other festivals, a fairly high ticket price. And so it's much more of a commercial exercise, and it's literally called Movement. Now, there are some wonderful things about, I've been a couple of times as it's been Movement as well. So the first time I went Demph, then the next time Movement, right? And it's grown and grown, and it gets pretty much bigger almost every year. It didn't happen for a couple of years because of the same reason everything else didn't happen, but now it's back. Now, it definitely brought, there's no large, strictly techno festival in the United States. That's pretty much been the domain of Europe, where techno has become much more a part of the culture there than it has in the United States, even though it's possible that it originated here, right? But it has helped to grow the popularity of techno in the United States, and it has allowed some of the original sounds of techno to have the floor for a weekend, where sometimes they get overlooked by newer styles that have come along and people don't even know that this is where the sounds came from, right? And like it was black music from Detroit, and people sometimes see white European DJs or just white geek, and they don't even have any idea that it was like kind of like soul music or whatever it is. So it's an important part of like the history of the music, right? But this hasn't done any, so techno has grown in popularity in the United States. You can now go into any large city and find a techno event at any time. The problem is it's done nothing to raise the quality of the techno events in place in the United States, in my opinion. The techno that is now really popular is like the shittiest version of it, just like we have the flimsiest leaders at the head of our movements, right? Like the really amazing techno DJs and producers that I would love to see, that it was rare that you got to see them way back when Movement first started, and it is still rare. That has not changed. Like the quality and the integrity of whatever this is has not become front and center in the way that you would hope a movement would make it. So this is in the music scene, just like I said, almost the exact same thing happening. Like I can go, every once in a while there's a shocker, right? I went to go see Jeff Mills the other night, and I was half worried that like Austin would be embarrassing and like only 200 people would show up, because he's not like the trendiest new techno person. He's like one of the old school classic Detroit people. That didn't happen. All the old school people showed up. Lots of new school people showed up. It was a really great night, but I was concerned because in general, like the person who's the best on Instagram, just like in the alternative information community, the person with the most money or the most memes or the most amount of publicity moves to the front of the room and completely has no regard for anyone who built the scaffolding upon which they now stand. Right. So literally the movement in techno is, what just happened?
Whoa. Do we need to pause? What the fuck?
I think I just kicked my power strip. So hold on 1 second and I will fix it. My apologies, guys. Yes, I think I kicked the power strip. I think let's see, is that what happened? Or did I touch that? I don't know. Okay, I think we're good.
Your mic still sounds like it's plugged in.
I think we're good. Okay, I think we are fine. Okay, sorry about that, guys. The mic is not powered by, it's powered by my computer, not by the.
Got it.
I think I just kicked my power thingy. Okay. So in that case, it's literally called movement, which made it a beautiful metaphor for this. Techno is now huge in the United States as health freedom, not real health freedom, but health freedom, right, is becoming. Like, they have created a very, very large movement of people who don't know anything more about health freedom than the techno movement has created people knowing stuff about techno.
Right. Okay. So there's a little bit of a lag now. Am I lagging as well? I don't know if it matters.
Okay.
But so here are the things that are coming up as you're speaking. One is, like, I don't really get quite as hung up about like those who are holding down the OG vibes getting the credit they deserve. But I do think it's interesting how those holding down the OG vibes don't get a place at the table at all and are kind of cast aside as cuckoo pants. I think it goes back to what I'd said maybe over the summer, which is I think we've already hit the fourth stage of ideological subversion. I think we're already in a communist kind of state of mediocrity, where this mediocrity is rewarded. But as you were speaking about movements, we've talked a lot about my old dance community in LA and Ryan Heffington, and Ryan Heffington absolutely changed the whole face of contemporary dance. I mean, you can clearly see a line in the sand of what dance was in our culture before Ryan Heffington and what dance was after Ryan Heffington. So Ryan Heffington has a lot of like other dance teachers who danced with him, collaborated with him, and they have these offshoots. And what I've noticed since Ryan Heffington went, super famous, is a lot of these other dance teachers are now being tapped as movement directors for magazines.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it the first time I heard it, but I guess they're hired to go and work with like the people who are being photographed to teach them how to move, which had me wondering as you were speaking, as we're like dialing in, okay, so what is movement? Which has me thinking men's, mine, like I do want to look up the etymology. But why can these people who are having their picture taken professionally as part of their job, why do they no longer have the ability to move themselves or to pose themselves? Like, how far have we devolved as a culture that you can't even pose for a picture without someone being hired to tell you what to do with your hands, body, and face, which makes me think everything's just faker than we think?
Two things. So great. So now we have it in three arenas, right? We've got the music, we've got the political or the social kind, and then we have the dance thing. So we're off to the races. And also, hat tip to my good friend Chad Stumpke, if people haven't seen his work on Stargate Detroit, in which he explains how the artwork in Hart Plaza in downtown Detroit basically signifies that there's a portal there that's opening. And of course, they would do their first movement rituals there. So movement would be, if meant, move the mind, move the mind, move the mind. Where are we going, right? What you're talking about with Ryan Heffington, yeah, before Ryan Heffington, the music, the pop stars and stuff, like their dancers did like routines like you used to see with like Janet Jackson and Madonna and Paula Abdul. They weren't just doing weird stuff, right? That's where the big separation started to happen. There was like maybe a little thing before that in terms of like some of the movements became a little bit different or more spastic, less coordinated than they had been like in the early 90s. That was, I think, before Ryan Heffington, but when it just got off into this very strange, very asymmetric kind of movement and whatnot. Yeah, there's that definite separation. Also, to what you were saying about we need to have movement directors, like this is why I no longer offer life coaching. Like, we don't need a coach to be able to live. Like, we're all already doing it. We're here. And I became much more particular with my language around what I'm calling what I'm doing, because I felt like it was demoralizing. And in the same way that you're talking about movement direction, like when you get your pictures taken for a photo shoot, they take hundreds, like, and of those hundreds, they pick a few. Right? If you can go through a professional photo shoot with hundreds of pictures taken and not get a single picture or whatever, like, I don't know that that's something a movement director could help you with anyway, but I agree with you.
These are professional, like, it's not like you and me. These are like actors, you know, who should already have this skill set in place.
Correct. This is that absolute infantilization, demoralization, you know, exactly what you said. Right.
All right, so I looked up the etymology of movement.
Yeah.
Change of position, passage from place to place.
Portal.
Exactly. To move, set in motion. In the musical sense, a major division.
Whoa.
Division.
Yep. So there was a division between what had been and what would be as movement came about in that sense, and in the sense that you're talking about as well. And in the alternative information community, there've certainly been movements, but I think this is the biggest one that we've ever had, because for all the crazy shit that's happened, all the conspiracies we've uncovered, nothing held everybody still for years as this one did. So the most people are involved or aware of this. And there's the like most amount of like financial nonsense backing it and writing on it.
So much nonsense backing it and writing on it. And I think in the same way that like we've honed in on a lot of the markers of ops and projects going on in the mainstream, I think movements and unity are now those same markers within the alternative media community, truth community, like whatever it is.
And also, I don't know, I maybe heard the Democratic Party referred to as the party of unity, and just in terms of like Joe Biden saying he was going to be the president for everyone. Yeah, right. But no, unity was the Brett Weinstein fabulous idea that I'm sure they're spinning up again as part of this. That was going to do this, you know, intricate, someone from the Democratic Party, someone from the Republican Party, and then after a certain number of years they switch positions and they both agree to this. I mean, just like nonsense Brett Weinstein kind of stuff.
Well, I think it's a buzzword that they use, because I'm looking it up now. That like the Democratic Party claims to be inclusive and welcoming to all. So I think like unofficially that word was being bandied about in like describing why people should join this party. It's clearly just straight up doublespeak and doesn't mean what we're used to it meaning. Yeah. It's super divisive.
And there will be a unity party, and that unity party will in some way or another, even if they pretend they're not, be connected to this necessary unity in the health freedom movement.
I mean, the necessary unity in the health freedom movement is so like,
well, it's all sponsored by the same person, the same people.
No, of course. But it's like, I would think that, you know, what frustrates me about what's going on in the health freedom movement is how many people aren't seeing it and being snowed, which is the same thing that went on with the IDW. But it's like this demand that we all have to agree on everything. Like,
or if we disagree, just don't talk about it. If you do disagree, like table that conversation for later. Let's not talk about it while we're trying to win.
It'll upset the movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're done with unity and movements for right now. Do you want to talk about Eric Weinstein a little bit? And by the way, I like heard a very unofficial plug. He doesn't often honor his brother. In fact, within this podcast, Eric basically called Brett a stupid, uninformed plebe, but he did back his idea unofficially of a unity party, as he implied what Tulsi Gabbard would do when she takes over. So I thought that was interesting, right? Because we know that she's definitely positioning herself to be, you know, whether this ends up being official or just background string pulling, the, you know, the commander in chief of the unity.
Oh, totally. And the fact that she was just on Jordan Peterson and Seb's, if you're here, I still haven't had a chance to watch that video, but it's like so clearly being linked with the IDW op. I mean, part of me doesn't even want to talk about Eric because I'm so sick of it. And it's so obvious what's going on. I think,
you just want to give our general takeaways? I have a couple of takeaways.
I mean, I think the general takeaways is that humility is a really beautiful quality in a person. And I really enjoy seeing people who embody that quality. And I think that quality was something that I was missing in this. I think it was such a roundabout way of driving forward the UFO op, which we talked about in Words 55 very clearly. I mean, the pieces that stick out to me are one, can you believe that the government is not talking to me and my brain about this?
By the way, just so people know, we're talking about the recent Eric Weinstein, very, very painful 4-hour appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast. Continue.
Yeah. So the pieces that I thought were interesting were, can you believe that the government isn't conferring with me on this? But then later in the show, he says that he and Sam Harris have been recruited into a UFO disclosure op by the government 3 years ago.
So they're the new Corey Goods. Right.
There's a lot of contradiction. Similarly, his can you believe that Elon hasn't reached out to me?
Yeah, he was like, come on, cut the crap, right? So
and I really give Joe props for this. I mean, for just the patience to sit through it. Wow. I hope he got a bonus for that episode.
Okay, so first of all, for those who have the wherewithal to sit through a 4-hour podcast, I made it to 2 hours and 22 minutes, and then that was it, right? This is the most staggering display of arrogance I think I have ever seen.
I think so. I totally stand by that hyperbole.
Right? The complete lack of self-awareness. Just B, there's no, a lot of times people can become arrogant in their, in one way or another, right? They may have an inferiority complex about something or a shortcoming, and so they mistakenly try to overcome it by overstepping, by becoming arrogant, right? But you can kind of tell what that is. Oftentimes short guys will talk about how big their package is or something like that, right? Or right, so they may have that, or they may have arrogance in their main field of expertise, right? They may have a lot of confidence that comes off as arrogance. And if they're actually truly good at what they're talking about, as much as it's still annoying, because we already know you're good, you fucking win we already know, you don't have to tell us. So that can be annoying. And you wonder if they have a really small package and that's why they need to do that, what are they doing here, right? Because they're already really good at that. But this is the most complete, well-rounded arrogance in every avenue, every corner one could it's just flabbergasting. Right?
I mean, he's presenting himself as a ladies' man. That was amazing. Cowboy science. We were hard drinking, womanizing scientists. I'm just whoa.
Right. But I mean, so he does this thing. I have first of all, some of my takeaways were the same as yours. This idea that he's in shock that the government isn't hired him at a higher rate than Anthony Fauci or whatever. He seems truly baffled by that. And then also the fact that Elon Musk hasn't figured out the fact that if he only conferred with Eric Weinstein, then all of his issues would be overcome.
It's Elon. He never says Musk.
Okay, yes, Elon. Yes, they just call him Elon. Yeah. So, but right. So that part, and then this whole thing, this idea that he and Sam Harris were recruited for a disclosure, and that Sam Harris got bored because they kept saying, "Oh, we'll tell you tomorrow. We'll tell you tomorrow," but that Eric didn't get bored. But the fact that they are talking about disclosure, puts them in the camp with Corey Good and David Wilcock, right? Like that disclosure is something that we must get from the government. Like these people who are like, everything the government does is incompetence and incorrect and da 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 da. But when they tell us that aliens and UFOs are real, we're gonna believe them on that one, right? Like that's always my favorite, hands down. But this idea that we need disclosure to come from someone else, like when you have a freaky fucking experience, you goddamn know it. If you really have the actual freaky experience, you don't need anyone else to tell you what that is. You know damn straight what it was.
Well, speaking about those freaky experiences is now illegal, right? That's now considered like a threat to national security. So if you, Dark Journals has talked about this. So if you've had a personal alien or UFO experience, it is now illegal to talk about that. And I also really liked Eric doubling down, and it's the same script with Brett and Heather saying, well, evolutionary biologists are the most qualified people
for everything
to talk about COVID.
Everything
Under the planet, especially propaganda. But Eric doubling down, saying, theoretical physicists are the most important people to be having the disclosure conversation. And then he says, he's like, I'm the greatest theoretical, I'm one of the greatest theoretical physicists alive today. And then he says at the end of the show, and I'm not even a physicist.
Right, because he's fucking great at everything. He's fucking great. He's just fucking Eric Weinstein, dude. And if you didn't know it, you really should. I mean, the whole thing is just like unbelievable. But he does this thing that I've observed in someone who's equally as arrogant, right? And
there's someone equally as arrogant? No.
It's not. This person is equally as arrogant. He just is better at it's just he's into a different thing.
Oh, it's that Andrew Tate guy.
No, not Andrew Tate. Right? Like at least Andrew Tate is actually right about some of the things he's arrogant about. He's not arrogant about all his wrongnesses.
I actually liked what Eric was saying about Ukraine, but the way he says it is very, very hard it's hard to stomach anything that comes out of his mouth. But I thought a lot of that was like, yes, correct.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So this is a gentleman that I'm let people sort it out for themselves, who was once on a show with you and I, and Randy may even have been a part, right? And he also has all of these special stories and exotic explanations for everything that are like not ever part of like what most other people know about those topics. And in some ways that can be kind of cool. But if you are completely operating from that position of like everything I say is something that no one's ever heard of before and is so complicated that truthfully no one's going to go look it up to see if I'm right or not, it makes it really easy for you to tell a lot of bullshit, because nobody's gonna, I mean, maybe one or two people, and I think there are a few people who did a podcast and wrote an article about Eric Weinstein who did take him to task on some of his nonsense, but those are right. But for the most part, most people don't have the patience or the knowledge to actually disprove. And so they just go, whatever, like this person is so exotic and so esoteric and they know so much more than me. Like it is fine to use personal stories or even lesser known stories, but use them use an analogy that compares it to something that people are familiar with. This thing, there's like another version of that is like this. And so a person can develop a level of understanding and then go check one against the other. And nothing that Eric talks about is anything that like anyone, like everything is his own story, right?
His own design.
I don't mean his own story. Like when I tell my own stories, I'm saying this is my own story, and I could be wrong. I might be making it up, or whatever. He's like acting like he has access to some hidden internet that the rest of us are not special enough to know about, and he is bringing us stories from the promised land, and we should thank him for it.
Correct. But when you're sharing a personal story, it's because you're inviting people into deeper realms of understanding you. You're wanting to expand the understanding. What Eric does, which is the exact same thing Brett does, is he pretends he's explaining it to you to create a smokescreen of opacity that alleges to put him on intellectually superior footing. So he makes it seem like he's explaining it so that we could understand, but it's all to further complicate.
Yes.
Apart.
Yes,
that's it.
That's exactly that. The other thing, and this annoys me not just about him, but about all of these like people way up at the front pushing the UFO and stuff, is this reliance on like the Jeremy Corbell stuff, right? And this, these, you know, military whistleblowers and Hal Puthoff and all these, like, I don't.
The people who've already been exposed.
Correct.
As part of
these are all the people who, right? Okay, so like, the alien and UFO thing is not my main topic. It's just not my, like, so I don't profess to make statements of fact or whatever about this, but if the phenomenon is really as strange as you know, we're being led to believe it is, to the point that it would take this long to figure it out or understand it, like, I'm just gonna say, right, go listen. Like, Randy used to do a ton of shit about aliens and UFOs, like, before I came along, and then he's done some recently. Actually, he just put something up the other day. I haven't listened to it, right? But my inner sense is that, to the extent that they exist, it's more along the lines of what some of his guests, I think there were some that were, you know, maybe he didn't even agree with or whatever, but he had a couple of really interesting shows about that kind of topic, right? And it was like, it had the resonance of like what that experience, to the extent that people think it is this highly meaningful thing that people think it is, would be like, as opposed to this nonsense that Jeremy Corbell tells us or any of these other folks, right? So you know, I don't pretend to know more than I know about this topic, which is very little. But the idea that he's now calling it disclosure, he's using this same language that was, you know, weaponized by, you know, certain aspects of the UFO movement and made massively popular by people like Corey Goode and David Wilcock and whatever, like, tells us like exactly like the level of clown show we're at.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, the fact that like Joe barely said anything the whole time. It was just like, here's the assignment, bring in the operative to lay the groundwork for this thing. He tried to speak up a little bit when Eric mentioned being asked to move out of Massachusetts because one of his math formula was so edgy. And Joe was like, wait a minute. And then Eric just like jumped in. Let me finish, Joe. Let me finish. So that kind of fell by the wayside. I mean, it's obviously they're speaking to an audience who's not hip to Corey Goode, like all these other things, and hoping that they'll buy it. And also thinking that we didn't track him a year ago on Lex talking about this as though this is new. And he's like so embarrassed, you know, that he's into this.
There was a couple other times, Joe, I felt like pressed him or just called him out, was like, that doesn't make any sense. There was like one point where he was trying to like describe some sort of thought tree or some sort of like tree of information, and Joe was like, yeah, I don't understand what you're talking about. Right?
I'm not saying this happened because I don't know, but I know sometimes people can take certain stimulants, cocaine, Adderall, whatever it is, that makes them extra edgy. Like a lot of people say that's what's going on with Biden. And when he gets really like angry and tyrannical, it's because he's hopped up. That's what I felt with Eric, because he was so angry and disagreeable for 4 hours out of nowhere.
Well, he's really mad that he's not respected in the way he should be.
But I mean, what I saw was like the exact same formula that Brett's using to put himself at the forefront of COVID is the exact same thing that Eric's using. And then the other thing that I thought.
And what's the hardest part about this is this, when you, after 4 hours with listening to Eric, you have a soft spot in your heart for Brett. He's just so much more likable, which is right. So
much more likable.
Yeah.
And again, it's frustrating because he said a lot of things that made sense around like woke culture in Ukraine and whatnot, but even the way he says it, it's so distasteful.
Yeah.
There was the piece, I'm blanking on it. It was like another where he exposed himself as not being that when he was going off on scientists and the lack of nobility of these people who aren't helping humanity, and how dare them. And it was amazing, like the self-righteousness that he was able to summon. It was like, Wow, that's a powerful tool. But he said it was the reason, the lack of nobility was the reason why he left physics in the first place. And I'm like, to go work for Peter Thiel in finance?
Yeah, very, very noble. Very noble.
And the other thing is how often he'll come back to Jeff Epstein and Ghislaine, and he tries to rationalize his fascination, forgetting that we know that he was called to testify in the trial. Right. So I pulled up that article, that Substack, that talks about Les Weinstein being Eric and Brett's father, who had some strange ties with communism and whatnot. But it does say in this article that I'm reading from Charles Johnson's Substack that Les Weinstein's law firm, is that right? Was the largest American firm to do work for the state of Israel. But but what was so interesting in this interview was that Eric claimed that the reason he's so fascinated with Ghislaine and Jeff Epstein is because he hasn't ruled out, because he's not just a physicist, a mathematician, a finance guy, a podcaster, a UFO disclosure guy, and the smartest person in the world, but he's also
an awfully sexy guy.
A total ladies' man. He's also doing private research on the side to expose Israel as part of what's going on with Jeff Epstein.
I didn't get to that part.
That came out at the end. And yeah, I mean, there was just so much in it that was.
Okay, so there's a couple more pieces.
Oh, wait, the last piece is that he always claims this financial hardship, which I've heard him consistently with the portal. And it's like, you work for Peter Thiel. Like, you're a big shot at Thiel Capital. Like, we're not going to buy that you're like a starving artist. I don't understand where he thinks that's going to land.
My guess would be he's not very good with money because of this same arrogance that you're talking about. That's part of his like mania, right? Like, my guess would be he's like goes to the casino or spends too much money on coke and hookers or whatever it is. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But that, like, he's probably lives a little too big for his britches, even if the britches are big to begin with, right? I don't know. So there was two other things that really caught my attention.
Yep.
And one was like it seems to be that he thinks he should be the producer of Joe's show because he kept telling him who he must have on his show.
Correct.
There was another. So there was that one. So there's three. There's that. So I guess he's looking for a production internship. I don't know. He must have all these people in his show. Then it was there's only two possibilities of secret places that could be doing hidden UFO research. And that's University of Texas or sunny Stony Brook, because you're here in Austin and I'm trying to, whatever he's trying to do to become in that group. And then the State University Stony Brook is the only college that's paid him any attention about his nonsense. So therefore they are on the cutting edge, right? That part was funny. And then this weird thing, remember when we did the last one and we showed the Darren Beatty piece, and he was talking about how like weird, there was this weird video of Joe giving Lex his watch. And then Eric was like, I too gave Lex my watch. And so now he has two watches so he can be in two temporal dimensions simultaneously. It was the weirdest fucking thing ever.
He also directly spoke to that video, and he's like, Lex never said he had anything to do with MIT. I don't think you got to
I didn't see that part, yeah.
So did you get to I don't think you saw the part where he defends Kanye and he talks about like the terror of being a Jew on Twitter these days?
Oh my God.
I know.
There's a caste system, guy. A caste discrimination system. All right. So what do you say we move on over to the comment section? So I'm going to scroll through real fast. I did see that we got a super chat from Misty Miller. Thank you so much, Misty Miller. Much appreciated. I can't go back and read through all of those. So at this point, what I'm going to say is if somebody has a question that they would like to have answered or a comment that they feel is important, insightful, entertaining, to put it in the box in all capital letters so it's easy to read. Feel free to super chat it if you like. And we will
Welcome
play
super
along.
chat.
We will play along. Just trying to see while we wait, because I know there's like a little bit of a lag between when we say it and when they hear it. Let's go back and see if anything, if I'm able to look and see anything jumps out and grabs me, but it's hard. There's so many of them to sort of scroll through and catch anything that might
I
be.
like what Square Peg Divergent said, love needs more words for nuance. I totally agree. It's such a an overused word that doesn't really come close to accurately representing what I'd like it to represent.
So I know Square Peg, and I hope it's okay if I say this, but she has an interesting mind, an interesting brain that she perceives certain things that most people perceive in a different way, and she would need that context in order to have the appropriate response. She's very bright, right? She has really super smart in ways that lots of people aren't. But you know, I get some people might say some of these tendencies were sort of spectrum-like a little bit or whatnot.
I think spectrum at this point just means you're a goddamn genius.
Yeah, right. But lots of genius people are a little different socially. And sometimes if you don't give them the correct context for something, right, then their response is like, huh? Right. Laura has a friend who has Asperger's. And one time she said, I'm going to take my eyes out, referring to take her contact lenses out. And like the face that came on this person, right? Because you know, needed context of like what she meant by that, right? So sometimes these things, I agree, around love. Like there's lots of things like I love pizza and I love my dad, but it's like not the same thing, right?
Totally. Davin, yes, Eric said multiple times during this interview what a womanizer he was and how popular he was with the ladies back when cowboy science was a thing.
Yep.
No comment.
I don't say so far we have no all capital letters. So like I don't understand. I watch all these other podcasts and there's like people have to sit there for hours and answer the questions and they can't possibly answer all of them. Like we're lucky if we get one.
I guess we've covered it all. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
I guess we've covered it all. All right. I do have an announcement. There is now a Words podcast YouTube channel. If you just type in, like I can't put the link here right now because if I went and tried to grab the link, it would take me out of this stream. Because I should have figured out.
Is it just youtube.com/words podcast? Because I could drop it in.
I'm pretty sure it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'm gonna put it in and someone try it and let us know if that's what it is.
Okay. So there are upwards of 40 of the episodes already there. We're going to be moving this over there over the process of the next couple weeks. Everything Words will be on the Words YouTube channel. I'm about 40 or 50 episodes in on the uploading process right now. In order for us to be able to live stream over there needs to be 1,000 watched hours. So if there's any of our past archive that you need to catch up on or whatnot, please go over there, subscribe so we can get some more followers there, watch some hours so we can be able to live stream and do monetization and all that kind of stuff. There is a few missing videos. There is that, first of all, there is the time when I got confused with the number of Words episodes with my Matrix Math episodes. So there is no episodes 15 to 20 or 16 to 20 or something like that. It jumps right to 21. But then 21 has now been removed by YouTube. So it's not there. But anything other than the 15 to 20 that you feel like is missing is on our Rumble channel, which is Words Podcast as well. I think it is like rumble.com/c/Words Podcast or something weird like that. Like the link is bizarre. You can go to the Rumble channel. Also, some of the videos are not the whole show. It's just a little advertisement. And then in those videos, there is the link to that show on Rumble. So within the next day or two, everything will be updated. We are going to pull this live stream from this channel and move it over and post it as a show over there. So if you did not catch this live and you want to watch it, you'll watch it over there. Was there anything else that I need? Oh, I want to thank Deirdre from London very, very much for contributing many hours of her time voluntarily to our project here, and she loaded all of the things onto the channel. So I just had to go through and make some adjustments in editing. Like, we greatly appreciate it. Like, you know, this is a lot of work to keep up with all the things you have to do to be able to do this. And so when people just offer to help out of the kindness of their heart, it is really appreciated. So thank you, Deirdre. Hope you're doing well. Love to hear from you sometime soon. All right, there's going to be an afterwards, and it will post later tonight on wordspodcast.locals.com. And I think that's pretty much it. Do you have anything else you would like to say to the folks before we go?
Sign up for my newsletter, danikatz.com. I'm back to coaching. You can find out more about that, quantumlanguaging.com. And we're going to record afterwards, which will probably be out for sure by tomorrow.
People are saying that they can't find the thing on YouTube. So I'm going to just search for it really fast and see if I can find it.
We could also just put like the first minute of this up as a tease with the link.
Let me just find it really fast here. Yes,
we'll do that. Added it twice, and people say that they're not seeing it. I
got it right here. I got it. Okay. I'm going to subscribe to it from this channel. I'm going to, this works perfectly. Okay. So let's just go right here. I don't know. They added a name to it, which number to it, which which must mean that someone else has the same name for something. So let me go here, and I'm putting it in the box right now. So this is the channel. If everyone could go over there and subscribe and catch up on any missed episodes so we can get our 1,000 watched hours, that would be awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. And we'll see you again real soon.
Bye.
Bye.